Memory transcription subject, Chief Hunter ISIF, Arxer Rebellion Command. Date, Standardized Human Time, January 16, 2137. I recalled my first unfiltered research into Earth, when I read what they said about the Arxer. Despite rampant empathy, it was doubtless that they were predators. Their history involved dominating their world, and harnessing it to suit their whims. When I understood that the Venlil were considered equals, not a pet or a tool, it required executive judgment about whether Terrans could be an ally. Their social nature was my perfect excuse to cover for their lofty ideals. Upon reaching the determination that humanity was a predator race, I took it upon myself to read their military doctrines. One adage that caught my attention was, "The best defense is a good offense." It was exemplified in the Sol system, lobbing asteroids with FTL drives and ambushing the extermination fleet with nuclear weapons. An active, energized attempt to hold the Harchan system was what I expected from Terrans. Watching the UN forces curl up into a ball at FAL didn't make sense, until it became clear that this was bait. Signatures climbed into the upper reaches of the atmosphere, ascending all the way from FAL. These were surface-to-space missiles, a concept that required pinpoint calculations. To accurately target something in orbit, from the ground, took unfathomable skill. The humans must have been mastering similar crafts for years. The name of the satellite wars rang a bell in my head, and I considered asking the Terrans about it. If we were to be future allies, I should have more than passing knowledge of their abilities. "This is tech from your satellite wars, yes?" I inquired. "Do you remember those?" "That was years ago, before Oleg or I were born. We're 22nd century babies, Generation Eta. I know what they taught us in school, and Oleg knows what he's read on conspiracy blogs," Lisa answered. Oleg admired the viewport. "I do know the mainstream narrative, I just don't blindly accept it. They say the conflict didn't seem that bad, it wasn't supposed to be a real war. We were only shooting satellites out of the sky, and poking at the digital boundaries. Those were just things, not people or places. No soldier ever fired a shot at another. But someone crosses a line, and it escalates. Like a domino effect. Suddenly, you have a nuclear reactor meltdown in Mississippi, and power going off in winter in Shenzhen. South American countries and African trade blocs get roped into embargoes, now they're on the shit list. China hits a French satellite by mistake, aiming for a US spy satellite, and now the EU's throwing retaliation shots. All this to say, yeah, we can snipe things out of the sky, no problem. Surface-to-space missiles can be hidden in the ground, thousands of them. The Kolshians come here thinking they're going to orbitally bomb us and our pretty little buildings, and the planet pulls an Uno reverse card. HRR, the history lesson is riveting. Humans call something a war where they didn't even shoot at each other. Kaisel's voice was thick with irritation, though he kept his words civil. "I feel much better about our chances today. Laugh at cyber warfare all you want. The Dominion and the Kolshians sure aren't," Oleg said. "Nor am I. The humans always know more than they should, and it is a benefit to our cause. Kaisal, unless you wish to be social, provide only battle updates." Disdain simmered in the Arxer runt's eyes. "Thousands of missiles in viewport range, your savageness. Firing on the Kolshians, not us. It's a lot for them to intercept at once." The warheads continued their flight toward the heavens, white daggers rising from FAL's verdant surface. Powerful engines propelled them toward targets, and onboard homing systems kept them trained on hostile Kolshians. Felra tensed on my shoulder, pressing her cheek against my neck. Her side-facing eyes were absorbing the scene from the viewport, as the enemy scrambled to account for all inbound munitions. Should I shield Felra from watching the assumed casualties that are about to play out? No, she can exercise her own discretion. She's an integral part of my team. Knowing how humans operated, I found it hard to believe that this plan was a one-trick pony, as they said. Missiles barreling down on the Kolshians were a threat in their own right, but they weren't the crushing haymaker Terrans usually had up their sleeve. Lights flashed from the lunar surface, though that was a mere restoration of Fal's old planetary defenses. Lasers sliced through metal with decisive power, and the Federation enemies didn't dare to approach in view of the moon. That forced them onto a single vector toward our position. The surface-to-space missiles charged across the void, and the Kolshians deployed a trail of interceptors. Most projectiles were felled by enemy countermeasures, tricked into an early explosion or broken up by outbound fire. The UN fleet snuck in a few lighter ships to toss shield-breaking missiles, but remained adamant in their orders for us to hold formation. I didn't understand what the humans were playing at. If our foes had suffered shield outages and were warding off multiple munitions, wasn't this our time to strike? Why are we not launching an offensive? I snarled into the comms. We should hit them while they're confused. You've got them reeling. A human commander responded through a closed channel. Negative. Please hold your positions, Chief Hunter ISIF. Engaging in close range is not advised at this time. Why not? These missiles and laser point defenses aren't enough, not against 1,000 vessels. The Kolshians have more advanced tech than anything we've seen. We're aware of the Commonwealth's enhanced abilities, so that's why we must coordinate our actions. Resources are limited, and the Arxer rebellion cannot sustain severe casualties. Please, hold on a little longer, we're setting up prime conditions for your fleet to strike, on our signal. We have a plan. We always do. The Kolshian ships were packing into an aggressive formation, and heading toward our own combined ranks at maximum velocity. The Terrans wouldn't want to let them have a crack at the vassalized Harchan. There was no way they'd just let the Commonwealth approach. Still, Nikona's military wasn't composed of oblivious fools. The tentacled bastards saw the markings of a trap, but were arrogant enough to believe they could plow through it. While time would determine who was right, I had sought out the humans' help. Now was too late to question their wisdom. All Arxer troops, ready your plasma weapons, but await the human signal. Let the Kolshians come to us, I issued the order to my fleet. They want to take us down, in cahoots with Betterment, and they're in for a rude awakening if they think they can just walk right in here. It's fitting that the two parties responsible for our starvation have shown they're on the same side at last. We will send them crawling back to the hole they came from. The Arxer rebellion fleet was comprised of every vessel we could pull from Betterment's side. Rogue captains with their warships, vessels that had stuck around from my original sector force, and lesser transports stolen by defectors fought alongside each other. Smaller craft had also been gifted to us by the United Nations covertly. I could discern design similarities to the Terran armada scattered among my forces. The proportion of our manufacturing that relied on Earth's generosity wasn't lost on me. We only learned of Nikona's and Gizno's collusion ahead of time because of Zhao's intelligence. That alone was sufficient reason to give them leeway, and trust that humanity could outwit the Kolshians. I disliked placing my fate in another's hands, especially after things had gone awry in the past. My pupils darted to a distrustful Kaisal, who lacked faith in humans after his failed defection to Earth. I then scoured Oleg and Lisa, who were poring over data without comment. The leaf-licking primates didn't arch an eyebrow, despite our forces being seconds away from a head-on confrontation. The Kolshians were already pushing through artificial satellites that drifted in orbit, and would have recovered their shields by the time we met. The missiles launched from the planet had been impressive, but only netted a few dozen kills. The humans cast a second wave from Fal's atmosphere. I didn't imagine the results would be better. If anything, the enemy knew to expect it now. This plan is asinine. There's no time to wait for planetary defenses to whittle away at the Kolshians. Maybe the UN has missed the mark here, and are too arrogant to admit their inefficacy. Felra chittered by my ear. Humans have a lot of explosives here, Sci-Fi. Is it like this, on all of their worlds? Let me consult the schematics they gave me of all their defenses and contingencies. Zhao hands that information out at public request, I grumbled. So you're moody. I'm scared too, but I'm sure these are different missiles than the first ones. They had lots of bombs in their staging system. You don't know how to read sensors, rodent. There's no difference between these missiles and the few thousand in the last wave. Kaisal spat. The same fucking make. If you know nothing about battle, leave it to your betters. I can learn, Kaisal. I'm just as intelligent as you. But if you admitted that, you'd have to admit to yourself that I'm not food. You're not food because Isif is cruelty deficient. He takes after humans with the pets. The damn humans are letting us down now, like they always do, because they'd leave any Arxer behind if it saved their skin. I don't trust a weak-minded animal, and I trust these apes even less. After considering his comments, I decided not to reprimand Kaisal. It might behoove me to revise my strategy for bringing him under my control, if I didn't want to execute him for insolence. Food and opposing betterment weren't making him cordial. However, what he claimed about the new surface-to-space missiles was true. Sensors backed up his initial claim, that these defense weapons were identical to the first wave. Even I wondered whether the Terrans were losing the thread. This second wave was showing signs of a targeting glitch, with warheads straying off course from the Kolshan fleet. I waited for them to veer back onto the correct heading, but many were pointing away from the enemy altogether. If anything happened to my command vessel, Felra would disintegrate alongside me. A protective growl rumbled in my chest, as I looked the Dosur with concern. The risk was unacceptable, the UN failed to deliver, and I was going to issue orders to siege the enemy. A sudden explosion appeared on the viewport, away from any Kolshan vessel. That was followed by another payload striking the wrong mark, and then another. The explanation for why the missiles weren't homing in on our opponents presented itself. The moronic Terrans had accidentally lobbed their weapons into Fal's artificial satellites, in what could only be described as an utter failure of their targeting. Anger burned in my chest, and I wasn't sure I could resist the urge to berate them for incompetence. I thought I could trust humans. If I'm honest, I admired their inventiveness. The one time I'm depending on them for the future of my species, they shit the bed. Fixing a scorching glare at the viewport, I watched a surface-to-space missile take out a satellite. It was ironic, per the now infuriating history lesson I'd received, taking out orbiting objects was why these weapons existed in the first place. Perhaps its programming hadn't been altered to steer it away from artificial debris. The impacted satellite was ripped into thousands of tiny pieces, which rocketed around the planet's birth like a whirlwind. Most microscopic shards were hurtling toward the Kolshans. Shrapnel impaled the oncoming enemies within seconds, puncturing vessels in multiple compartments and crippling important functions. Navigations went haywire following hits to specific hull regions, whereas a lucky blow to the centrally located drive sent a handful of enemies up in a fireball. The perils were compounded on isolated manned ships, where debris could slice into the bridge and its personnel. Fortunately for Felra's sake, most foes were drones, so casualties wouldn't weigh on her conscience. Their automated ships are built for evasion, but how do you evade a wall of debris? No calculation will save them, I mused to myself. Human command flickered back onto the comms. Arxer forces, you are a go to engage the enemy. Harass their flanks and target weakened ships. Keep behind the moving cloud of debris. Copy that. All Arxer forces, the Terrans have baited vulnerable prey and signaled our opening to pounce. Let's remind these miserable herbivores who the actual hunters are. Miserable herbivores? Felra squeaked, as I switched off the channel. Don't be like that. You can do so much better. I want to see a day where you make peace with miserable herbivores. Miserable isn't a flattering qualifier, nor is it one I use as a blanket term. The Kolshans fit that description, so it is appropriate here. They are not who they say they are, yes. Their deaths will not be mourned by anyone with a worthy opinion. Oleg chuckled. Truth. Go get Sci-Fi boy. The arboreal predators migrated from their defensive arrangement, and brought their ships into firing range. Few Kolshians had escaped the consequences of the satellites, which had acted as grenades when they blew apart. The power of a single missile was amplified into a lasting storm, that made our orbital passageway unassailable. The Commonwealth was hellbent on quashing my rebellion, but they didn't wish to lose every vessel. Enemy ships peeled back, likely having received a command to retreat. I watched over my fleet, as they snapped up stragglers with deadly vigor. The humans pressed as deep as they could afford to risk. Any crippled vessel became an immediate target for the Earthlings. To think I'd been livid with them for a brilliant strategic play. The Kolshians needed to set the terms of their engagements with the United Nations, because they weren't gaining any traction on prepared Terran battlegrounds. My movement would survive another day, and we owed it to these weaponized defenses. The Secretary General had earned a humble thanks for his intercession. Woohoo! What did I say about calamari? Oleg cheered. Lisa smirked to herself. Don't jinx us. Wait for the last ones to be mopped up before you pop the champagne. Let me gloat a little. Especially after Kaisal said he doesn't trust us, apes. The Arxer advisor scowled. I made the mistake of trusting humans once. Your species' character doesn't change because of one victory against prey. Sure. You're tempting fate. Don't use the word victory until they're all gone, Lisa shot back. HR. No talking is perfectly fine by me. It wasn't a long wait for the conflict to resolve itself, per Lisa Reynolds' superstitions. The last Kolshian craft were downed or chased from the system within minutes, sent to nurse their wounds elsewhere. I had the presence of mind to commend the humans' efforts, over our shared channel where my command could hear. While the United Nations was not an official ally, this showing renewed my confidence over the impact they could make, when they joined our clash with Betterment. If the rebellion held out long enough, we'd have the most devious predators in the galaxy on our side. That was an unparalleled advantage, in my book. This sent a message to every Arxer rebel about the competency of our fellow hunters. I hoped the humans would succeed with their quest to topple the Federation, in a hurry. Whatever could be done to curry Terran favor, Zhao must be convinced to back us when his aid was needed again. Memory transcription subject, Captain Sovlin, United Nations Fleet Command. Date, Standardized Human Time, January 16, 2137. The Terrans were well informed on the base's design, perhaps having obtained blueprints of farsal underwater mechanisms. Our submarine had glided under the bottom of the structure, which triggered an automatic hatch to unseal. We ascended into a shaft, and it resealed upon detecting the full volume of our displacement. The water drained from the chamber, before a gentle computer voice welcomed us to the galactic archives. It was time to take the mantle of authentic history back. I could feel my emotions in turmoil as we geared up. Tyler, Carlos, and Samantha were wearing full-face respirator masks, along with the rest of the landing party. It was simple to determine through our instruments that we were in a normal pressure, fully aerated environment, but the Kolshian side of the conspiracy had dabbled in aerosolized weapons. The UN was taking extra precautions to avoid future incidents of cured soldiers. The next attack could be worse than the cure, if they could target specific genomes with diseases. If the Farsal went to all this trouble to hide the historical cache, there's no telling what we'll find here. We all accept the risks that they could flood or blow it up with us inside, sabotaging the mission. We disembarked in a hurry, knowing other submersible craft would follow behind us. Giving the Farsal time to destroy evidence or trigger destruct mechanisms was an unacceptable risk. Aliens like myself and Anso were given the choice whether to wear biohazard gear, so I opted not to. What were they going to do, cure the Gojid race again? However, the Yodel, despite belonging to an herbivore species, had donned a specially fitted mask over his snout. Why the garb? Have you been getting flesh cravings from being around Tyler? I asked. Anso sucked in a sharp breath. Nobody is messing with my biochemistry ever again. Though I agree, Tyler eats too much meat for his cholesterol. Tyler tightened his fingers around a gun. Judge all you want. I'd rather die than live without a fucking burger. That's not a sane thing to say, I mumbled. Well, you've never had a burger. Rabbit food doesn't hit the spot, man. Spare Baldy the gory details, Sam chuckled. We got work to do. Upon receiving a signal, Terran soldiers pushed out in pairs through a cramped exit door. There were no sounds of resistance from the reception pad, despite the Farsal base's secretive nature. I sidled up to Anso, and we followed our human friends out into fresh air. My gun was ready in my grip, but no hostiles or personnel were in sight. There was only a modest service door, which could be rigged with traps. Perhaps armed guards were waiting for us to enter the main area, before mowing us down. With that very suspicion in mind, the humans blasted down the unlocked door with charges. Confusion was evident in their body language, despite the hazard masks and their lack of tails. The peek inside revealed only a library-like lobby, with a lone Farsal receptionist behind a desk. She gasped in surprise, and abandoned all focus on her workstation. If I wasn't mistaken, her drooping ears were scrunched with some level of unhealed grief. Are they planning to kill us intruders on sight, and this alien is a rare soul with a conscience? Grief doesn't make any sense. Hello. I am Archivist Vake. The Farsal laid her empty paws out carefully, and didn't flinch as UN soldiers crowded her. I am the only receptionist on duty, and I will help you find anything you are looking for. All records are stored on physical nodes for security reasons. There are a few staffers on duty in each room, but they are unarmed historians, not a threat to you. Tyler, being an officer of Monahan's ship, took charge of the situation. Why should we trust you? Us archivists all wish your experiment could have succeeded. We exhausted every avenue, and tried to revive it every so often. I knew a human well once. Danny, his name was. He got sick, just like you all do. I haven't interacted with any humans in a while. It's not worth it, getting attached to a creature with a short lifespan. I blinked in confusion, trying to discern what the Farsal archivist was referring to. Anything involving human experimentation was not above board, and the conspiracy's typical aim was to snap predatory habits. Why would this clandestine receptionist have known a human? Why would she care about him getting sick, to the point of showing grief? The Kolshan Farsal conspiracy treated Terran lives as toys, not viewing them as people. Choose your next words very carefully, Vake. What experiment? The blonde officer jammed his gun against her temple, chest trembling with distaste. Have you captured more of our fucking civilians? The Farsal stiffened. I assumed you knew. You're not here to learn about your kind's condition. The fuck are you on about? We came here for your cumulative records, but now you're sure as shit gonna spill what you're talking about. It would be easier to show you. Shall I take you to the human room? It's dedicated to your kind's exploits. Fine. Don't try anything smart. Go ahead, lead the way. Vake pointed with a claw to a swipe card, and slowly reached for it at Tyler's nod. The Farsal walked to a stairwell door, and tapped the plastic rectangle against a scanner. With a beep, the locked barrier clicked open, permitting us entry without use of force. The Terran soldiers were on edge, expecting the staffer to spring a trap at any minute. I didn't understand why she was so compliant yet unafraid. Tyler kept the gun barrel close to her head, not letting her stray from his guiding touch. A few personnel were left to guard the reception area, as we followed the Farsal blindly. The Galactic Archives appeared to be a multi-level building, with entire rooms dedicated to collecting items and record-keeping for a sole species. Fishing a visual translator out of my utility belt, I scanned it over various labels. Crocodile. Civkit. Uncarry. Arxer. The last label gave me pause, as I craned my neck to peer into that room. The crocodile, Civkit, and Uncarry rooms appeared to have a small number of staff from the native species, clearly ones brought into the fold. For obvious reasons, the Arxer's space lacked such inclusions. Nobody would be insane enough to employ the savage greys. Recalling my anger upon learning that Kotha's tale was true, I wanted to see for myself any documentation the Federation had of Riss. Our priority now was getting to the bottom of Vake's story about humans. It also interested me what the Farsal knew from their initial observations of Earth. I was uncertain whether the ancient, primitive predators had shown their redeeming attributes back then, during the vicious wars. Furthermore, we could discover the exact details of why they pronounced the Terrans dead, without verifying that fact beyond all doubt. Human, Vake read off a solemn plaque at the end of the hall. This is the one you want. Give me a moment, please. The human door was different from the rest. It was sealed off by a magnetic lock, which was a step up in security from even the Arxer. The only rationale I could think of was that the Farsal were hiding something about the Terrans' past, that not even their colluders all had clearance to know. What had they seen on Earth that would be that devastating if it got out? Vake swiped her card over a scanner, and was given an odd confirmation message. The Farsal ducked her head in forlorn fashion, pushing the entrance open. Tyler shoved her into the room, forging ahead with apprehension. I followed Marcel's friend with hesitant steps, and what I saw almost swept me off my feet. The extra security wasn't about any information they were hiding, it was about species containment. Audible gasps came from the UN soldiers, as their eyes landed on 3 humans seated at a desk. The trio didn't look particularly impressive for predators, hunched over holopads with singular focus. I couldn't see any signs of mistreatment, restraints, or coercion. Other than odd plastic clothing, there was nothing out of Earthling norms. A few Farsal milled about as well, though they halted their tasks upon our entry. The Terrans working with the archivists seemed amazed, spotting others of their kind. "What the?" Samantha murmured. A gray-haired human walked over with a limp, and startled when gun-pointing and shouting voices greeted him. Tyler ordered the soldiers to round up the other staffers, placing them into kneeling positions. How had Terrans gotten into the galactic archives, at the bottom of Talsk's ocean? This didn't compute in my brain, but I sure wanted to hear what Vake's experiment was. Were they trying to turn Earth's people into Federation sympathizers? Carlos shouted at the silver-domed man who approached us. "You! What is your name?" "George Murphy." The strange human's eyes darted around, and he showed signs of nervousness. Who are you?" "We ask the questions." "Okay, sir. Please don't flip your lid. I just don't understand, where you came from. You're human." "We come from Earth." "I know that." "Whoa, my golly, is that the United Nations symbol?" "Yes, that's who we work for." "Look, maybe I should explain," Vake began. George's eyebrows knitted together. "So they've been hiding spaceships all this time? They really did find a flying saucer at Roswell. God. I'm not sure what they've been doing to your mind, but there was no hiding about the FTL tests," Carlos replied. "It was live-streamed everywhere, from Earth to Mars. If you somehow missed that, it was pretty damn hard to miss the raid on our motherland." "Live-streamed? Mars? Raid? Sir, what is today's date?" "January 16th. I think." George's eyes rolled back in his head, and he passed out cold on the floor. Carlos seemed stupefied, as he knelt to lend medical aid. Mr. Murphy's 2 colleagues bore horrified expressions, slipping into a state of panic as they overheard. I wasn't following what was going on myself, but there was a clear disconnect between these possible captives and current events. Tyler wheeled on Archivist Vake, a livid expression no doubt lurking beneath his mask. "What year do they think it is?" the blonde human hissed. Vake closed her eyes. "I was explaining. We've been working on this project for centuries, on and off. I'd have to check your files to give specific answers, but we haven't visited Earth since your presumed extinction." "Our what?" a panicked Terran staffer asked. "That was during the Cold War. 150 years ago, at least." Samantha shook her head in bewilderment. "Fuck, this is a new one." Tyler waved a hand. "Get the three of ours out of here, and to our medical bay. Make sure you screen them for contaminants or contagions before removing your gear." The year. 2137. Soldiers took care with the unconscious George Murphy, and the two other predators were escorted out too. The staffers seemed more agitated than they had before our arrival, with one still demanding answers from the UN troopers. Vake watched as the strange Terrans were herded out, and her farcical cohorts were lined up against the wall. The receptionist squirmed under Tyler's glare, breathing a deep sigh. "I'll tell you as much as I know. So, we visited your planet after hearing your signal broadcasts. We have thousands of hours of footage of you. You can look through it on the mainframe there. Ask any of us for an eye scan to bypass the password, if you want to," Vake said hurriedly. "I can see that you know nothing about the project." Officer Cardona leaned toward her with menace. "I better be made to know something in a hurry. If those humans are that old, how are they still alive? Cryosleep. Are your kind familiar with the concept?" "Yes. What I'm still not familiar with is the fact that you've been abducting humans for centuries. When we learned that there was a second predator species, let's say we were concerned. There was a sample size of one with the Arxer, and the cure failed in horrific fashion. We're more the behind-the-scenes types than the Kolshians, so we always get the first test subjects for an operation. We record the information about every species, okay? Go on, Vake. Tell me exactly what you did to these poor people. To all the people like us throughout galactic history. Easy now. We secretly snatch a few subjects for all meat-eaters. Keep them chilled while the Commonwealth runs their calculations, then begin a few rounds of testing. Despite your high aggression, it would have been wrong to authorize a genocide without doing everything we could to save you. Your trials would determine scientifically if the cure could work on a predator, a species that killed on its own. I found myself pacing as humans did, resisting the urge to chew my claws. Why had these Terrans been so compliant with the Farsal's whims, if they were kidnapped? The predators didn't usually give in so easily to intimidation, and these seemed to be working with minimal supervision. My intuitive feeling was anger, knowing that innocent civilians had been whisked away under every species' nose. Gojid denizens had this done to them, without a clue what aliens were. What could random people off the street have done, to deserve being taken away from their lives? This is an atrocity. Anso seemed appalled too, judging by how rigid his tail had gone. The Yodel must be wondering if his kind had been kidnapped in similar fashion, despite being herbivores. After all, we'd seen Sivkit staff working here, and they were plant-eaters. Knowing the marsupial, I bet he was itching to run off to the Yodel chamber next. It would reveal the stark details of their uplift, and any steps taken to mitigate their uncanny aggression. You knew the cure worked on us, and you still participated in the raid on Earth? Tyler hissed. Vake shied away from him. I'm getting there. We were quite hopeful. When we administered the cure, the humans were all quite receptive to it, at first. They were fine, and we were starting to give the Kolshians a hopeful prognosis for Earth. Sure, the aggression was a nightmare, with you crazy predators resisting beyond what was reasonable. Most had to be locked away. We learned with the second batch. You're talking about humans like we're a batch of fucking cookies. What was your magical recipe for a tame predator? Drugs? Torture? No, we got them to cooperate of their own free will. It was a matter of not telling them we administered the cure, instead, say that other aliens had infected them, and we were studying it for their benefit. Scares them at first, but they come around. Then we ask them about their culture, and claim we're studying it for posterity. They'd document anything they remembered quite liberally. They were willing to work with us, despite us being prey. Your kind can be rather charming. Gee, thanks. Less pandering, Vake. I meant that. Anyhow, we solved your temperament well enough. Humans could be manipulated. Long as they weren't left unsupervised, they wouldn't fight. Our trials were exhaustive, meant to run several years. Years of eating herbivore food, and living the life of genuine sapience. We wanted to believe in you. But when we were about to pass it off to the Kolshians for broader studies, it all collapsed. Collapsed? The fuck does that mean? Collapsed how? The subjects started getting sick. Every last one of them, and we couldn't do a thing to stop it. Physical maladies and mental impairments were the lesser symptoms. In some cases, they went insane, hallucinations, not sleeping, depression, deranged aggression, total memory loss. Death occurred on its own, even for the ones we didn't have to put down. We call it the hunger. Humans go mad without flesh. The hunger? That can't be right. Dr. Bari says that humans don't have bloodlust or a need to eat animals. Prolonged abstinence would really result in insanity or hunting outbursts. Carlos leaned down to my ear. B12 deficiency. We need that vitamin for neuron upkeep and blood oxygenation. Fucking idiots. Now Kolshians were busy crafting a story, trying to explain your, eyes. They mistrusted humans, but we'd convinced them you were different than the Arxer, Vake continued. So, thanks to our faith, they already announced your existence to the Federation, and the failure threw a wrench in our plans. Time to backpedal. The Farsal ambassador packaged your terrible history, and the Kolshians fed them that instead. Tyler shook his head. You painted the worst picture of us possible. Not that we didn't already know that, but we were buying time to figure out what went wrong. The Kolshians agreed to help stall, hence why extermination plans against Earth dragged on for decades. But constant failures with our human experiments weren't acceptable. We'd made no progress. The Commonwealth lost patience, and pronounced you incurable. They also issued a directive to wipe all public knowledge of predators having culture, so no bleeding heart would try curing one again. Yet here you are today, trying to fucking cure us again. The Farsal felt it was wrong not to cure a curable species. The Kolshians wouldn't even listen to the idea of dropping the cure as a last-ditch effort. It was all straight to killing you. You're alive because of us. We thought we'd find a breakthrough eventually, so we had to continue the work. We spun the tale that you bombed yourselves, and stopped them from wiping you out. I blinked in confusion, not certain that I'd heard correctly. The Farsal had deceived everyone, including their Kolshian conspirators, in order to perfect the cure against humanity. Meanwhile, their lone subjects were predators who were frozen the better part of 2 centuries ago. The Terrans survived to the present day because a twisted regime thought they could be molded into herbivores, given time. From what Carlos told me, if the Farsal figured out the missing mineral, they would have been right. Another day, another crazy alien. It always gets better, Samantha whispered. Sorrow flashed in Vake's eyes. So the galaxy proclaimed Earth dead. That lie was a grave error in judgment. We were blinded because we grew attached to the subjects. We still care, even after everything that's happened. But due to perpetual failures, the Farsal came to believe the Kolshians were right, curing humanity was hopeless. We're running out of specimens, but we still raise a small group once every few years. After the hunger gets the last ones. If you think you failed, why didn't you finish us off decades ago? And then, you help attack Earth after we try to join your federation? The Kolshians would have noticed if we observed or attacked you. They have the Shadow Fleet, not us. We didn't want to admit we lied. Chief Nikonus was livid when your kind resurfaced, so despite the wild schemes he tossed around, we joined the extermination fleet to fix our mistake once and for all. You know what the irony is? Tyler tensed his shoulders. I'm sure I'll love to hear it. The irony is, now, the Kolshians are the ones who think you can be cured. We told them that it failed back at the time, but they didn't listen to how it all transpired. They wanted a yes or a no on their killing plans. So today, they think they can mold you, because Noah lied on Alpha and said you can live on just plants. Nikonus, the old codger, fucking fell for it. It was almost as if the Farsal was pleased that the humans knew the truth, so they could validate her thoughts on the hunger. I would still be reeling from one of her claims, when the next one hit me like a slap to the face. I wasn't sure how to begin processing such stunning admissions. However, having the world I thought I understood blow up around me was beginning to feel familiar. It never became easy, but it was morphing into a manageable sensation. Okay. That's quite enough, Vake, Tyler muttered. One last thing. Where are the rest of your human specimens? The Farsal archivist gestured with a paw. Right this way. The Predator soldiers followed their guide, and I steeled myself for a meeting with primitive humans from their most barbaric times. The ones that greeted us in this room hadn't seemed so violent and uncivilized. Still, I mistrusted anyone who was raised among bloodshed, without the comforts Earthlings enjoyed today. Hopefully, the Terrans were ready for any trouble their awakened kin might stir up too.